Hello, everyone. I'm Michael Serapio. Well, if you were to summarize this past week in politics, you could use the three T's: tariffs, Trump, and Trudeau, with the last of those T's, the Prime Minister, being asked how difficult navigating the trade file will be now that Trump is headed back to the White House, with at least two advisors as well already expressing their preference for Pierre Poilievre. Well, take a listen to how Justin Trudeau answered a question about that on Friday.
Well, first of all, Canadians get to decide who forms the next government, and despite what Conservatives may be hoping for, there's a lot of Canadians scratching their heads at some of the decisions Pierre Poilievre has been making.
Now, the Prime Minister went on to say that he and Trump have already worked together in the past. He looks forward to working again in the future. And to talk about this, we're now joined by Robert Fife, Ottawa Bureau Chief for the Globe and Mail, Tonda MacCharles, Ottawa Bureau Chief for the Toronto Star, and Joël-Denis Bellavance, Ottawa Bureau Chief for La Presse. Nice to see the three of you. I missed you last week. So listen, you know, we've heard it from the Prime Minister more than once that it's going to take this Team Canada approach in order to meet on any kind of challenge that comes about out of the Trump administration. But can he truly rally all the players if the poll suggests he's not going to be Prime Minister in a year's time? And also, when we're hearing from a couple advisors from the Trump team already expressing their positive opinion about Pierre Poilievre. Bob?
Look, I don't think it's going to be the same situation as it was in 2017 and 2018 when we renegotiated the NAFTA. There was an all-Canada team approach to it, but things have changed. As you have said, I mean, we're months away from an election campaign with a deeply unpopular government and a deeply unpopular Prime Minister. Mr. Poilievre has shown no inclination whatsoever to join this Team Canada approach. He's not going to do it. Why would he do any favors to Justin Trudeau? The premiers have not shown the same kind of Team Canada approach that we saw in the past. Doug Ford, who has been closer to this government than almost any premier, has come out being very critical of, particularly on the border issues, as has the Quebec premier, Daniel Smith of Alberta as well. So I just don't see you're going to see that same kind of unanimity, and that's because you have a Prime Minister who's weakened, and a Conservative leader who's doing very well, and the Trump people, many of the new appointees don't like him. So it's going to be really, really difficult for him to be able to pull it off.
What do you say, Tonda?
Well, in addition to the opposition from premiers, I think there's also a factor that the hardliners that are now in Trump's cabinet are unknown quantities to the Trudeau cabinet, and they haven't been able to strike up those relationships for a number of reasons. I mean, Biden is still president. Trump is not yet president, so addressing those and making those connections directly right now is a difficult thing for them to do. But I also think that overall the relationship is a bit more fraught because Mr. Trump is more emboldened by those hardliners and a little bit more unpredictable. So, you know, I think Premier Andrew Furia in Newfoundland said it best, like, you can have all the best plans in place, even on paper and people, and ready to pivot and be nimble, but how do you strategize for chaos? And that's what that Trump tweet or post on Monday night caused in this town. It caused chaos. It caused chaos across the business and union sectors in the country, and everybody was struggling to know how it would impact Canada and how do you respond. So I think it's even more broader than just Mr. Trudeau's unpopularity. I think there's a deep-seated anxiety around how do you deal with an unpredictable, even more volatile Mr. Trump.
Joël-Denis?
I think it would be a mistake on the part of the Prime Minister that he thinks he can assemble the same kind of people, the same kind of Team Canada approach to Trump 2.0. I was talking on Monday night after Mr. Trump announced his intention on social truth to a person who was very much involved into the negotiations the last time around. And he said he expects the Trump administration to do everything it can to weaken further Mr. Trudeau and his government because they don't like that government and that person. So we can expect that the next 6 months, while Mr. Trump arrives in the White House, will be more destabilizing for Mr. Trudeau's government because there will be, I think, a deliberate attempt on the part of the White House, led by Mr. Trump, to try to weaken Canada with the government.
But I also think that we shouldn't just say that it's all going to be all chaos, too. I think you're going to see a significant effort by the provinces and the federal government to strengthen the borders, not only because of the concerns about fentanyl, but really the big concern about all these illegal migrants who may be coming up here to avoid mass deportations from the United States. But one of the most important parts of the old strategy, which is still very effective, is to engage with the 35 governors in the United States who principally trade with Canada, and for the U.S. business community, because of the supply chains that were so interconnected as an economy, even more so than in Mexico. So you've got to let American voices speak out for Canada for a change, and well, we're up here not sure what our government is doing. I think that's probably our most effective strategy.
And that is underway. Those kinds of connections and outreach efforts are underway and have been for a number of months, but ramped up this week pretty quickly.
Yeah. I think because of the turn as well, though, right? Because ever since the Montreal caucus, about a year ago from the Liberals, they were talking about trade, but this tweet comes out, and it's not trade that he's raising. He's
tying it to borders.
To border security. And yet trade will be the impact, but ultimately these are security issues for the United States.
They are, and I just want to circle back actually to the whole idea of relationships, because in the weird aftermath of that tweet, we also got this sort of strange message from the Prime Minister's office about, contrary to everybody's assumption that the relationship is always antagonistic and confrontational between Mr. Trump and Mr. Trudeau, and contrary to what Daniel Smith, the Alberta Premier, suggested about this such deep personal animus, Trump and Trudeau appeared to have this conversation that for at least several minutes at the outset was all niceties and how's everything going, and only very belatedly when Mr. Trudeau raised it, well, what about this threat, this 25% tariff? So I just wonder how that also stands to play out. I mean, we don't really understand, I don't think, we have other people's view of it, but I don't know that we really understand that relationship and how it might be leveraged.
Okay. I will say, we don't know the relationship, but again, we've heard a couple of advisors to Donald Trump expressing their preference, indirectly for Pierre Poilievre. And from Pierre Poilievre, take a listen to what he had to say about some of the concerns being raised by Donald Trump.
So we have Quebec sending in the Sûreté du Québec, their police force, to secure the border. Premier Smith, common sense leader, is proposing to use drones, provincial drones, and other police law enforcement measures from her province to secure the borders there. I understand Doug Ford is looking at something similar. So now, because Trudeau has so thoroughly broken the border, we're getting a patchwork of premiers who have no choice but to try and hold the border together with bubble gum, scotch tape, and elastic bands.
All of which I have in my desk, if any of you need it. But listen, Joël-Denis, I'll ask you on this one. No, I don't. I don't chew bubble gum. No. Okay. But listen, Joël-Denis, when you hear that from Pierre Poilievre, it does make me wonder, because here you have, again, security concerns being raised by Donald Trump. Has Canada laid itself open to this criticism by not getting ahead of this, just for our own sake, without even the Americans? That's
the exact point I was going to make, because we seem to be reacting to Mr. Trump all the time. Why not be proactive? Why was Mr. Dominique Leblanc, the security minister, did not announce that we would invest more to secure the border after the victory of Mr. Trump? He would have faced the eventual threats from Mr. Trump right off the bat, even before he would have pronounced it. So we're late to the game, and we look very disorganized in terms of the Canadian strategy, and that's why you've got premiers telling the government what to do from Toronto or from Edmonton or from Quebec City, because there's a void. And when there's a void, somebody's trying to fill it to be able to reassure business people, Canadians, and Quebecers all at the same time.
Bob, how much of this is our own making?
Oh, I think it's a lot of it is our own making. And after 9/11, our borders were basically shut down, and we brought in some significant security measures at the border that have been very effective. But in the last few years, the borders have become weaker. We've seen the influx of migrants coming into this country that's caused a significant drain in Quebec, but in Ontario as well, and they failed to act. And Look, I think it's good that they're all getting together, and we are going to be able to do that. And unlike Mexico, Canada and the United States, we are really quite integrated with the U.S. law enforcement. You know, the U.S. media have said, "Oh, Canada catches more people, have been caught more people trying to get into the United States." Well, that's because we're more effective than the Mexicans are. I mean, we do a much better job, but we do have to do much more. I mean, the drones and the helicopters and the hiring of more border guards and RCMP officers or police officers are absolutely a necessity, because we've got 4 years of chaos ahead of us.
Yeah, 4 years of chaos. What would you say about was there a possibility to get ahead of this before that social media post from Donald Trump?
Look, I don't know that it was possible to anticipate 25% tariffs, but they actually did have a campaign vow from Trump that he would impose 10 to 20% tariffs. So yes, I guess it was possible to anticipate that he could, and was before, so we know his track record of being unpredictable and try to promote a reaction. I would hesitate, though, to assume that much could have or should have been done in advance to secure the border in this regard, because they did a lot on the Safe Third Country Agreement by giving themselves the ability to push back migrants. That's done. And secondly, there is that question of, you know, I think that Mr. Trump still uses, and many of his people in key positions view tariffs as a tool of foreign policy pressure points. Yeah. So they would have used it anyway. I don't know that, you know, there's a line about obeying in advance. Well, you know, you almost need to see what it is he's threatening to then counter it. And lucky for us, he's tied it to border security. Well, we can address that. He hasn't yet tied it to some other foreign policy perspective or objective of his, say 2% NATO defense spending. You know, that would be a harder one to address, right? So he's using tariffs as a sledgehammer to exact a foreign policy price. Right now it's border security. They're going to address that. Could it be something else down the road? We don't know. He and his advisors all support tariffs used in that way.
Mm-hmm. You know, sadly, I was going to touch on a whole bunch of other things, the $250 paycheck, when is the fall economic statement, but we've run out of time. World peace, but we're not going to get into it today.
Bubblegum?
Yeah, exactly.
Bubblegum experts.
There we go. Bob, Tonda, JD, thank you very much.
Thanks. Have a good weekend.
You too.
Thank you.